We're going to talk with an agent, an owner of KW United, but a guy that goes way back, and we both go way back to the old Canadian Soccer League, Barry MacLean. Barry, welcome, my friend.
Hello, Anthony. How are you?
I'm very good, Barry. I want to get your thoughts, Barry, before we talk about KW United, some of your clients, and Canadian soccer. I want to get your thoughts on the Euro. Specifically today, Barry. I don't know if you watched any of the action, but to me, today was an unbelievable day for the game that we love. You saw Iceland make history. I don't know if you heard that call the guy from Iceland made. It was unbelievable. You saw Portugal and Hungary. I mean, it was an unbelievable day. Give us your thoughts on this Euro and specifically today, Barry.
Well, I mean, it's definitely very exciting. There's so many talented teams, but it's great to see some of the smaller countries like Iceland and Northern Ireland and, Albania having results in the tournament and competing with the biggest teams in the world. And obviously the passion of the commentator in the Iceland match was unbelievable. And what they've accomplished with such a tiny little population is phenomenal.
The gap is closing worldwide in the game we love so much, Barry. Whether it's South America, Europe, Asia, you name it, you can see smaller nations like we see Iceland, Albania, and others starting to close the gap. We saw it in the World Cup, a CONCACAF nation like Costa handing Italy its lunch. What do you attribute this to, Barry?
I don't think that there's any single factor that you attribute it to. I think each of those areas have passionate cultures, and sometimes you get like the dream class of players that come through, but often it can be down to what they're doing with those players and how they're trying to develop them that makes the difference.
Okay, so let's talk about that, Barry. This is why I called you today. I wanted to discuss with you Canadian soccer, the landscape, and how we can get to where an Iceland is, or how we can get into that conversations of the USAs, the Costa Rica, and the Mexicos, because we have the facilities that we need for the most part. We have wonderful people that want to do so much, but it seems, like always in this country, that many people believe they have the answer and everyone does their own thing. In your mind, Barry, if I give you the keys to the Canadian Ferrari, how do you go about starting it, and how would you go about taking care of business so we could get on that right path?
Well, that's not an easy question, Anthony, but I think first of all, there are a lot of really great people in Canadian soccer that have the right intention. And at the recreational level and the grassroots level, we probably are as good as anywhere in the world at what we do. The problem where I think that the thing that's broken is that we do not separate the elite football from the recreational kind of house league kids soccer. And that's where I think the chasm becomes too great for us. And it's crazy that you're even, saying, how do we get to where Iceland is, which is a country that's smaller than, Kitchener-Waterloo. And looking down the road, I think that there's so many things that need to happen. But the first is taking charge of the elite side of the game and doing a better job with that.
Well, then let me ask you this then, Barry. You and I have heard this before. We've been around the game a lot in the grassroots area, and we always hear the talk that whether it's clubs or bigger academies, the kids at the lower ages, the house league kids are the bread and butter of each club, and they're the ones that really help the elite teams. How do we get that mentality changed then?
I think you have to separate the elite soccer from the clubs altogether. Right? The clubs do a great job. They build a great infrastructure. They administer things exceptionally well. They run the programming well. The parents are engaged. All of that's great, and it's all great for the kids that just want to go out and kick around a ball. But the kids that are passionate and talented, we've done a real disservice with. We haven't provided them with the proper coaching. We haven't provided them with the proper facilities. We haven't given them a compass on how to get to the next level of play. And we are so divided on that level of soccer. We've got the pay-for-play academies. You've got the youth clubs. You've got now MLS clubs, PDL clubs, League One clubs, NASL clubs, all kind of pulling in different directions. And until we kind of get the ship going in one direction, I think we're going to have problems.
Barry, let's go way back to the Canadian Soccer League days. You and I both worked there, myself with the North York Rockets, yourself with Kitchener back then, and it was completely a different world back then. We understand that than it is today. But back then, That was the closest I believe we ever got to get into a World Cup. And most of those players on that Canadian men's national team came from the Canadian Soccer League. Whether it was, an Ian Bridge, a Randy Reagan, on we could go. And we also had, I think that we're missing out on this conversation, Barry, was some Canadian coaches. How vital, how important is it if this new Canadian League is going to launch that we not only have 3/4 or more of Canadian content players, but also coaches as well, Barry?
Yeah, I'm excited. I've heard rumblings about a new league, and that would be amazing. The old Canadian Soccer League produced probably our golden age of talent. When you look back at Alex Bunbury, Paul Peschisolido, Paul James, Randy Reagan, Jason DeVos. There's countless players that came through that went on and had really good careers. So from that perspective, it was a great situation. Moving forward, if we have a league, I do think it's important that we have a high number of Canadian players and also Canadian coaches, Canadian managers, Canadian presidents, people that understand the culture of the country and try to push the game forward where it's Canada first. So that is going to be a priority if that league is to get off the ground, and I'm really hopeful that it will.
Barry, 2015 PDL champions, KW United. What an unbelievable accomplishment for you and all the staff and all the supporters. Congratulations on that. You've played American teams consistently the last number of years, and you've gone toe-to-toe, winning a championship. Again this year, you're sitting, if I'm not mistaken, at the top of the table with, for the most part, if I'm not mistaken, if not every single spot of Canadian Ontario players. Sergio Camargo, here's a kid on the rise. You've got others on there. It's not hard to go up against the Americans and beat them and go toe-to-toe, Barry.
No, it is hard, but it's doable. And a number of years ago, I was one of the people that was a critic of the Canadian soccer landscape, and rather than continue to complain about things, I thought, let's put our money where our mouth is and let's build something. And with KW United, we've taken a team in 3 years that's produced 18 pro players, 2 coaches that have gone now working with TFC, an executive that's now general manager in Orlando. We've had a championship team in the PDL, beating along the way Chicago Fire, TFC, New York Red Bull, Seattle Sounders. And we played against Sporting Lisbon when they had Marco Rojo, Rui Patricio, Eric Dyer, all players that are, highly regarded around the world. So what we've accomplished in a very short period of time is amazing. And I think we need to have more of those types of regional programming where you try to recruit good talent, give them a good environment, and give them the tools to go on and be successful. In the last 3 years, we've been really lucky. This year we have Martin Painter as our coach, but prior to that, we've had Chris Posniak and Stuart Neely, and all of them have done an exceptional job. And we need to give that kind of an environment where day in, day out, the kids are competing, not worried about winning so much as competing daily to understand what it takes to get to the next level of play. And like you said, we've got Sergio Camargo, who's currently rated as the number 1 player in the PDL, but there's others like Kamal Miller, Justin Springer, kid that was with us but is now with TFC, Darren McLeod. Those are all Canadians that have a chance to go on and play at a high level of soccer.
Barry, talk about that professional mentality. And what age do you believe that youth club or academy really needs to start instilling that in that young mind?
I think we have to start looking from 10 on at how we take the players that are really passionate about the game. You go to any youth soccer event and you'll see a team, and there'll be a decent little team, but 12 of the kids will get, as soon as the game's over, will get in the car and go home, and there's 3 or 4 kids that just want to kick the ball around all night. Those kids, we need to engage them early. We need to not make it a winning first mentality, but make it so that they have to compete every day, because around the world, that's what's happening. And we also have to share information with coaches. We have to have our coaches go outside of the insular market. Like I see most of the people in Ontario have already been out of Ontario. We need them to get into South America, into Mexico, into the States, into Europe, into Britain, to see different ideas and how do we go about developing our players, and then get a sense of where we really are, because we are far behind.
You know, Barry, you mentioned Mexico, and there's a ton of money being poured into some of their big clubs there, Pachuca, Tigres, Club America, on, and they're starting to attract a lot more American players, hopefully some Canadian players, and I think that's great for, you know, the CONCACAF region, that not always the players have to go to Europe to play and get that experience, that it would be real good to get, you know, some great experience in Mexico playing with a CONCACAF nation, a powerhouse, and come back to Canada and shine for Canada, Barry.
No problem with that. I have no issue with some of the players dipping their toe in the water in other environments, and not everyone is going to be suited for the Canadian environment or the American environment. Some of them will be suited to go into Scandinavia or, you know, Slavic countries or Latin countries, but we've got to create the opportunity for those players. One, we have to be able to assess the talent. Two, and three, we have to be able to give them the tools to be able to compete when they go into those situations, which I think is the biggest issue that we're lacking in.
You know, Barry, you mentioned about, you know, not concentrating on the wins and the losses, on development. I couldn't agree with you more. I've said this for years and years and years. I've got a basement full of trophies and medals. My two boys are grown up, off to university and working, and I wish one of them would have had more of an opportunity to get a scholarship or play pro, and I would have given all those trophies and medals back. How important is it in your mind that we sit down with the national body, the provincial body, and say, hey, let's look at things a little bit different. Maybe we don't need the provincial championship, a national championship. Maybe we need to concentrate and put more money and effort into just developing young men and young women to push them on to success. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I hate the whole trophy mentality that we have in Canada. We definitely accumulate those things, and most of the youth clubs put a premium on winning championships, regardless of what their mandate says. For me, creating a culture where they're training every day in a competitive environment, and this is where I think maybe it goes off the rails. Sometimes the people think when it's not winning, it's not competitive, but you can create a 3v3 environment that's super competitive. You can create a 66 environment that's super competitive, and I think that's what has to happen. And the other thing that happens in the youth soccer market is, because trophies become important, people go out and recruit all the best players for one team, and those players win all the championships, but they don't develop because they're not challenged on a daily basis. And these are some of the things that I think have to change. Most of the most successful players that we've had over time have not necessarily been the best talent of their age group. And I could look at a couple of guys that I coached, Paul Totera for one and Jason DeVos for another, who were both very, very good talents, but there were others in their group that were as good or better and had maybe some other tools. But those two had a mentality that was superior to anybody that I've coached. And you know, you look at the results. Jason had a 10-year career in England, and Paul had a 10-year career winning a Bundesliga title and also playing in the Premier League. So, you know, the mentality is something that we have neglected along the way. I mean, I'm not saying that we should neglect technical and tactical, because we're far behind on that too, but I think the biggest priority is making sure that they understand the mentality that it takes to become a professional soccer player. It's not easy.
So then talk to the parents, Barry. Give them some advice, because I've been in it with two boys now, and I know, and I've heard all those stories, I've experienced it, I've witnessed it, I've been part of it. And to me, the biggest disease of all Canadian soccer, youth soccer in Canada, in Ontario, is the parents. Because once they see that maybe the team isn't doing well, the better players end up leaving to another team. You feel sorry for that coach, because that coach is trying to do the best he can, learning, going to coaching clinics, bettering himself to better the team. But maybe the team isn't winning and bringing those trophies in. So you get a group of parents, 5 or 6, that get into their little posse and say, hey, this team is going down. Let's bring our 5 or 6 best players here and let's enjoy some winning and trophies. Talk to the parents and explain to them how dangerous and a disease that is.
Well, my thing is, rather than looking for the team that's going to win the trophy, let's look for the coaches that can actually help you progress as players. And at some point we have to start quantifying who's successful coaching at the youth level, because the measure for that is not how many trophies they won, because there's lots of guys with a garage full of trophies and championships that are very poor coaches, and there's a lot of guys that have no trophies that have produced a lot of players. And really what they want to do is get into an environment where somebody who can help them grow technically, grow tactically, somebody that will challenge the kid and put demands on them without being abusive or too aggressive, because that's what it's like everywhere else. And the real measure's got to be who is producing players and trying to get those people into prominent positions, which does not happen now. My feeling right now is over the last 30, 40 years, we keep putting a Band-Aid on things, and it hasn't worked. I mean, we are a country of 35 million plus that have produced very few players, and you look at Croatia and, you know, all the countries like that, 4 million who are producing 20 players a year. And you look at why is that, and there's got to be a reason, and really I think it becomes down to the elite infrastructure, and what we're doing and what they're doing are significantly different.
Barry, just before we let you go, I really appreciate your time. You put your money where your mouth is. It's not a cheap investment to travel in PDL. You know, you go to Michigan, you go to Ohio and Dayton, you've traveled to Cincinnati, I think Pittsburgh as well. And so it costs money to feed these boys, to pay for the trips back and forth. You got to stay some places. So you put your money where your mouth is. But talk about some of the success stories you've had as also representing some players that have gone on to success in Europe and MLS. I know that a lot of people, when they pick up the phone from clubs and they speak to you, they trust you. Unlike when they pick up the phone to some others here in Canada, which already has an issue at developing quality players to get contracts. With you, it's different. Your track record speaks for itself. Tell us about some of your clients that are on to success right now.
Well, we've had quite a few players out of the PDL, like Julian Boucher, Nate Ingham, Ben Polk, Jay Chapman, AJ Cochran, Zach Ellis-Hayden. Those guys are all playing at the MLS or USL and on the fringes of MLS right now, and there's a bunch of others that are playing in other areas. And then you look at some young players that have come through different channels, like Michael Petrasso, Marcus Godinho, that are both playing in England. A kid, Dario Zanata from Vancouver, he was with the Whitecaps, but ended up at Hearts in Scotland. He's 18 years old and playing in the first team. We've just taken a number of young Canadians and placed them in clubs in England, like Harry Payton was at Fulham and now moved to Hearts. His younger brother Ben has just signed with Blackburn Rovers. Kosovar Siddiqui's at Stoke City. So there's options for players, but they have to be players that are really committed to the game and put the time and effort into, you know, honing their craft. And but I don't think it should be that they have to drive 3 hours a day to be able to make that happen. We've got to be able to do that regionally and create environments. In Kitchener-Waterloo, Mario Halliper is a coach here that's managed to produce 3 and 4 young players that have gone on to play in professional environments, and we need more people like that around the country.
Barry, listen, we thank you so much for your time. We thank you so much for what you've done in Canadian soccer. Keep it up, and hopefully one day this Canadian League gets off the ground and you can supply a lot of your great talent from KW United to some of the big clubs all across Canada.